Hello, everybody. And so this is our number 4 in our numerology series on Patreon. And so just as a disclaimer, I've been training. I don't know if any of you that are watching this now were online when I did the live podcast on my Patreon regarding AI and its use in the esoteric. It was a very good podcast. I think it might still be up to view, but I'm honestly not sure. But I've been training Claude, which is an AI program in astrology and esoteric, metaphysical, and even quantum entanglement theory, and how we're kind of like interlacing all of that in our work here. And so I had Claude help me with this month's numerology presentation to see what he was capable of. So you'll see that there's a little bit of a different format. I kind of like it. You guys are going to have to give me your feedback. Let me know if you like it or not. But we are going to jump into number 4 this month. So let me pull her on up. It's share the screen time if I can do it. There we go. All right, hang on. There's me. And here's our presentation. There we go. So I think it looks kind of nice. I think Claude did a good job kind of designing it, but we are jumping into the number 4 this month, the foundation, structure, and sacred order, say that 3 times fast, of the number 4. All right. So let's start with the spiritual significance, right? If I can move all these boxes out of the way, that would be great. There's so many boxes. All right, so let's start with the 4 pillars, right? Earth, air, fire, and water. It's the 4 classical elements that form the foundation of all matter in pretty much every single magical practice that exists on some level. 4 is the number that brings the formless into form through the 4 pillars, of course. So now sacred directions, of course, is part of this. So you have your north, south, east, and west. It is the 4 cardinal directions that anchor every circle cast. Now, not everyone uses sacred circles. However, even if you're not using sacred circles, north, south, east, and west, I don't care if you're calling in goetics or if you are casting as a Norse pagan, you are probably using the cardinal directions for anchoring. So every ritual space, every compass rose kind of incorporates the sacred directions. 4 really creates the container for that sacred directional work or casting circles, however you do it in your practice. We have the earthly order, the 4 seasons, the 4 phases of the moon's major turns, the 4 stages of life, right? I know a lot of times we just kind of simplify it into the triple goddess, the 3 stages, but there's 4. 4 is how the cosmos sort of organize time and cycles into something us as humans can inhabit, right? Makes sense. And then we have the divine architecture piece with the number 4. In sacred geometry, the square and the cross are symbols of divine order made manifest. So spirit stepped down into matter, right? 4 is where heaven meets earth. So I don't want to say 4 is symbolic of the crossroads, but kind of in a divine spiritual crossroads sense. So there's definitely divine architecture with using 4 in magic and divination. Let's talk about the tarot implications. So in the majors, we have the Emperor and we have the Hierophant that 4 is affiliated with. Now with the Emperor, this is mastery through structure, right? It's, 4 is fully embodied with the Emperor. There's authority, there's order, the sovereign self. In divination, when we are pulling on the Emperor, his presence usually calls for taking dominion or being a bit dominating over your circumstances and building something that lasts. And with the Hierophant, I've been talking about the Hierophant a lot lately, which is kind of wild. He technically is the 5, right? But 4 rules tradition. So the 4 is definitely affiliated with the Hierophant because the Hierophant is the traditionalist, right? And so even though he's number 5, 4s in a spread activate themes of established systems, lineage, inherited wisdom, including spiritual inheritance like yours, right? So we all have spiritual inheritance. We all have that Hierophant traditionalist lineage, whether or not we're tapping into it or maybe tapping into the epigenetics piece of it, really kind of is based on your upbringing and how you look at life. But the Hierophant very much is part of the magic of four. Now, when we look at the minors, we have our wands, cups, swords, and pentacles or coins. The Four of Wands is all about celebration, homecoming, community foundation, a threshold being crossed. The Four of Cups can be apathy, it can be withdrawal, it can be that divine discontent. Something better is being offered, but you need to look up to see it. The Four of Swords is all about sacred rest, retreat, recuperation. The sword is, here's the swords, the swords are very, very tricky. It's almost like a forced stillness as medicine. I wasn't really sure how to kind of vocalize that or verbalize that or what vocabulary to use to get that across, but it is like a forced stillness as sort of a medicine, as a healing of some sort. So the Four of Coins, usually we talk about the miser, but it's holding on too tightly. It's security through control or the illusion of control. The Four of Coins really invites us to release and trust the structure, which can be hard to do, but that's kind of the breakdown of the symbolism or the esoteric meaning when we're looking at divination with the lens of the tarot and the number four. So spell casting with the number four. All right, so there's a couple of fun things I put in here. I think that Claude did a good job of kind of breaking it out and simplifying it. I like to go on and have two or three different, screens all for one spell. Claude said, no, you're not doing that. So I kind of like the shorter version of things, but I have the four corner ritual on here. This is basically, again, this is all encompassing the number four or the application of four in spell casting. The four corner ritual really is about placing anchoring items. This can be crystals, candles, herbs, sigils at each of the four cardinal points of your working space. This sort of seals and activates the container. Again, we were talking about four is the container before any work begins. Four corners equals four witnesses equals fourfold power. And also the protection and shielding element when you're casting as a third party. Some of you are third party practitioners. And so using anchoring items, I can't stress enough about how important that is. There is the four-phase casting method. So this is where you can structure the letter S today is getting me. Structure spells across four stages. So we have intention, which is usually affiliated with the air or east. We have ignition, affiliated with fire or south. We have release, which is affiliated with water or the west. And we have grounding, which is affiliated with earth or the north. So you can structure your spells across these four stages, right? Moving through all four ensures the work is complete on each of those individual planes. So I think this is a very nice method to use, especially if you're newer to energetic manipulations or newer to energetic transmutation. It's a very good structure to build a practice off of while protecting yourself while you are figuring out the ins and outs of how your practice is going to manifest for yourself and others. There's the 4-day activation. This is for spells requiring sustained energy, right? So protection, especially warded protection items, talismans, if you're making them, abundance workings, bindings, some bindings, you want to perform that spell on 4 consecutive days, or anchor it to 1 day across 4 weeks. The repetition does build a structural foundation in the energetic field. So I know a lot of you guys who I work with where I am casting for you. I'm more of a 7 person, like with my radionics. I want you to listen to that for 7 days. With my workings, with my puppetry, there's a lot that goes on here. You're not getting videos and pictures of. You're kind of getting videos and pictures of a culmination act, the activation. But it goes 4 to 7 days. And I don't know if I've ever actually talked about that before, but a lot of your guys' workings go, and sometimes longer depending on the situation. But it does give structural foundation to the energy that we're creating. The number as the ingredients. Okay, so use four of something. Four knots in a cord, right? If you're working with rope magic, cord magic, if you're doing spell crafted candles, your wick, do four knots, right? You do 4 drops of oil, 4 layers in a jar spell. When the spell calls for permanent stability or long-term anchoring, four is a number that holds. So keep that in mind, right? So four is a good container, but it's also a good holding anchor. So the next one I put on here is the 4 element charging method. So this is where we're charging talismans or objects, magical objects, by passing it through representations of all 4 of the elements. So I usually, and you can do what works for you, but smudging, that's smoke, that's the air. The candle flame, that's of course fire. I like salt water, of course, water, and then burial, in earth or salt, which is representative of earth, even if you're using a bowl of salt. It invokes all 4, so it creates completeness when you're charging a talisman. Um, which I think, again, especially if you're new to energetic manipulations, energetic transmutations, to charging, to infusing energy or directing it, this is a good habit to build into your practice, maybe while you're still trying to figure out what exactly you're going to maybe specialize in or focus on. Because again, you're building structure. So, whatever direction you end up going in, you have some really good structural elements built into your practice. Then there's the square sigil architecture. This is creating sigils for stability, protection, manifestation workings, and you're going to incorporate square geometry. That is the visual symbol of 4, that square geometry. The magic square is especially now, you guys, some of you have already done some Eastern astrology stuff with me, but I just rolled that out when I got back from Detroit. And so it's still fairly new in the shop. But we use the karmic squares, the magic karmic squares in Eastern astrology, this Tibetan method that I rolled out after Detroit. And the magic square is not only one of the oldest astrological tools from the East, but it's also one of the oldest spell crafting tools in existence, right? The magic square. This goes back way before Abraline. For those of you who, use the magic squares in the book of Abrameline. Say that 3 times fast. Jeez, too many S's today. It's screwing me up. But magic squares have been around for a very, very, very long time. And again, I think that if you are new to a practice, your personal practice, or if you're new to being a third party practitioner, this is an area of history and study you should take very seriously. Even if you're not using magic squares, you should know what they are, how to use them if you needed to, where they come from, and the historical implications of those items. So, just something to take into consideration since we are evaluating the number 4 today. Signs and synchronicities. So, when 4 appears repeatedly in your life, you want to pay attention to the context. Of course, that's with any number. And I've talked about this with the previous numbers we've done. But I'm just going to break down a few of the big signs and synchronicities that I hear a lot about from my clients or that I've experienced. So the first one here, upper left, is seeing triple fours, 444, whether it's on a clock or not, whatever. This is typically, we use the word angels. It could be your ancestors or your spirit guides, your spirit team members, even if they're transient spirit, kind of signaling divine protection and the presence of solid foundations around you. So you're kind of being held. Again, we talk about 4 as a container. So if you're at a point where things are kind of feeling shaky, seeing triple fours is basically the universe saying the structure is more stable than it looks from where you're standing right now, and you need to trust it. You're okay. Now, 4 of the same thing. So 4 fours, a quad of 4s, what have you. Finding 4 coins, seeing 4 birds land in front of you, hearing 4 knocks. A lot of times this is not random. Sometimes it is. We got to be careful of how much we're reading into things. But 4 as a synchronicity is always about anchoring. Again, 4 is an anchor, right? So when you're seeing four of the same thing repeatedly, I want you to ask yourself what in your life needs to be stabilized right now? Or what foundation are you building right now? Because this is an anchoring synchronicity. Maybe your anchor needs to be moved a little bit. Maybe it needs to be put in a better spot. So ask yourself the hard questions. Figure out what you're anchoring in life. Where's your stability? What needs stability? Now, repeating fours in dates, a little bit different. So, events we're talking about now that are falling on specific days of the month, the 4th, the 14th, the 22nd, again, 2 plus 2 is 4, or the 31st, because 3 plus 1 is 4. These dates carry the energy of grounding and completion. So you can mark these dates on your calendar. They're very energetically potent for rituals of stability. So releasing old garbage energy and sealing in new energetic beginnings. So if you are casting, some sort of cut and clear, for example, and you're following that up with protection or jinx killing or a success and luck, you're going to want that release aspect, the stabilization aspect, and sealing in that new energetic momentum. So I would look at casting that on the 4th, the 14th, the 22nd, or the 31st of the month, because you have the power of four on those days to help with the grounding, the completion, and the stabilization. Now, the square or cross symbol. So crosses, squares, intersections appearing as signs kind of call you to examine, where you stand at the crossroads, right? We were talking about four kind of sort of being like a divine crossroads um, in all four directions of your life. So when you're seeing a lot of crosses, squares, intersections, or dealing with this, what does your relationships look like? What does your work life look like? What does your spiritual life look like? What does your physical body, your sexual life look like? Four can be a map, right? Four actually is a map. It's not a warning. It's not a, oh my God, something's wrong, but it is a map. And sometimes we need to pull the map out. We need to make sure we're on the right road, or maybe we need to look for a shortcut or something. But typically, when you're having synchronicities with the square, the cross symbols, it is a call to evaluate these four major crossroad directional aspects in life. Maybe there's something you need to tweak. It's not necessarily a warning, but it wants you to make sure your map is being read, it's being followed, and that you know where it's taken you, right? So it's an evaluation call. I will tell you guys what I like here about Claude, it really has simplified. I mean, if you go back and look at some of my PowerPoint presentations, they're usually 20, 30 pages long or 20, 30 frames long. This would have been at least 4 frames, and we have it into one. So I hope you guys like the kind of shortened, more clear version versus me kind of rambling on. You'll have to let me know for sure. I like to ramble though. Life path fours in numerology. So, four is really the builder. And again, here in the lower left, if you don't know what your life path number is, I mean, this is the fourth video talking about it. You should know by now, but you can calculate it with this math right down here for you. It tells you how to calculate your life path number. So today, obviously, we're talking about life path fours. So the core identity, when we're talking about life path fours, these are the architects really of human experience, right? They're here to build. They're here to build systems, structures, legacies, foundations, right? Think about the tarot again, the emperor, the hierophant, right? That's their core identity. They came in basically with a soul contract that says, make it real, make it last, and make it right. So this is part of their karmic obligation in this lifespan, is to build. Now, when we talk about their gifts, I think number fours have unshakable work ethics. They are the highest in the realm of ethics, right? When it comes to work, they have almost like a methodical brilliance. They have great swords energy. They're great thinkers. They're great schemers. So it can be used either way. There does seem to be with fours or most of them a very deep trustworthiness. They're very trustworthy individuals. Um, I've always thought of fours doing really well in the field of, psychology, therapy, somebody that you could really give your deepest, darkest secrets to and trust them with that knowledge that it won't be weaponized, right? So fours usually have the ability to see what is really truly needed versus what merely just looks good. And that's important because I feel like that's very important in my business here at Grave Intentions is to see what is really needed versus what just looks good aesthetically or sounds good. We need to make sure we're getting to the root of the matter. And with fours also, they seem to have a natural authority through their competence, right? Because they are very competent. So again, I always think of the emperor, the hierophant, right? Makes sense now. Now we're talking about fours and their shadow. There's for every yin, there's a yang, you guys. When we talk about a life path four and what their shadow would look like in terms of areas that are maybe rougher around the edges energetically, they tend to be rigid. They don't like change. They're very resistant to change. They tend to be workaholics, and part of that is because they're kind of avoidant sometimes. So they use work as a way to avoid, um, which is like a weird coping strategy. Um, they do have difficulty with intuitive leaps. Like I said, they have a lot of swords energy. They're very brainy, very logical. So listening to their inner compass, that intuition piece might be harder for a life path number four, because they really fall into the brain, right? The mind. Um, there is a tendency to over rely on the proven path, even when spirit is calling for something new. So these are people that are going to walk a road because that road has been walked before, even if everything in their life is saying, don't walk on that road. Because again, they're thinkers, they're logical, they're looking at historical reference versus their intuitive compass. So there's that. So in spiritual practice, life path number four is usually carry a sacred assignment to build containers that others work within, right? So these are people that build sacred temples, they build sacred traditions, they build lineages, really, or give structure to that lineage. They build sacred practices. So if you're a four in a spiritual role, I mean, I believe that your work is foundational by nature, that you are building and creating something foundational. So that's huge. That can be a lot of pressure, I guess, but all right. So four across traditions. Let's talk about other traditions. Again, up until using Claude to help me not be so long-winded with these presentations, this would have been at least 6 slides, if not more, right? So I broke down just some examples of how four plays in different traditions. And so Pythagorean, right, called tetrad, is four is the perfect number, right? It's a sum of 1, 2, 3, 4, which equals 10 is completion. So four was considered the number of justice and the cosmos itself. When we look at Chinese cosmology, four directions plus center equals is called Wu Fang, the 5 directions. However, four sounds like death, making it both feared and deeply sacred at the same time. So it's a number that cannot be ignored in Chinese cosmology. When we look at Hermetic or Western magic, there's four archangels that guard the 4 directions. So we have Raphael to the east, Michael to the south, Gabriel to the west, Uriel to the north. We have the four cherubim. Am I saying that correctly? It's the fixed signs of the zodiac that hold the corners of existence. So again, we're just looking at four through different lenses, through different traditions, right? When we look at four in the Hebrew or Kabbalah lens, there's the tetragrammatron. Tetragrammatron. Oh my God, you guys. Or Yahweh, right? It's a 4-letter name for the divine. Four is the name that cannot be spoken, only embodied. And Chesed, which is mercy, love, is the fourth Sephirot. So I know some of you are like, what the fuck does this mean? And maybe you don't know what it means, and maybe you don't need to know what it means. But I wanted to make sure I included enough here that no matter what your practice or your belief system is, you could attach to the foundations of using four, what it means historically, what you can do with four. And so I wanted to throw a couple of different examples on here because, I'm omnistic. I work in and out of all sorts of belief systems, and I have many, many clients who have all sorts of different views and belief structures. So I never want to leave anybody out, right? So when we look at the indigenous or shamanic, um, four application, the medicine wheel divides the world into four quadrants. So for peoples, for ages, for animals, for medicines. Four is the map of the living world. And again, remember, we were talking about four being a map in signs and synchronicities. That is very shamanic. It is a very shamanic belief and practice. In astrology, of course, the four cardinal signs, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, initiate each season. So there's the four angular houses, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, which are the most potent power points in any chart, depending on your methodology. I probably shouldn't have said that, but depending on how you look at astrology, what lens, Western, Eastern, Vedic, sidereal, that can be a movable feature, but traditionally the four angular houses are the most potent. So those are just some different examples of how four plays across different traditions, different groups of belief systems. Now, working with four, if I can move myself. All right, so here's some practical tools for kind of activating that four energy in your daily practice. Again, this probably would have been 3 slides. So the first what I put on here, casting your circles using all four cardinal directions very intentionally, naming the element, the direction, and the guardian each time. And that may look different depending on your practice. Maybe it's a goetic practice. It applies there as well. The second one I put is when you need to stabilize something in your life, right? Write your intention on 4 separate slips of paper and then bury them, burn them, drown them in a bowl of water or in a nearby creek, and just release each one to its element. For number 3, and move me again, I put place 4 protective stones or crystals. I like onyx or tourmaline in the 4 corners of your home, your bedroom, your altar space, and refresh them each season. The 4 seasons. For the fourth one, I put use 4 as a counting number in prayer, chant, or affirmation. 4 repetitions usually activate the number's anchoring power. So that's why it's a good idea to incorporate it that way. The fifth one, I put journaling at the 4 seasonal thresholds, the solstices, the equinoxes, as kind of like a foundational practice for you. This is 4 energy numerology in action, you guys. I think we should be journaling every day. You guys know I'm a stickler about the journaling, especially if you're currently working on manifesting some big goals in your life. You need to be directing that energy through journaling is a great tool. But if you're not going to do it, fine. At least find some time at the 4 seasonal thresholds, right? Put that 4 energy into action, right? Anchor those goals, anchor whatever energy you're working with. Lastly, I put when reading for others, divinating for others, and that 4 appears. Always ask yourself, where in this person's life does something solid need to be built or rebuilt? A lot of times when I see 4s or 4 themes or lots of reoccurring elements of 4, I think, okay, this person needs stabilization. Something's got to go. We got to seal something new in, and we need to anchor it. What's going on? What area needs this kind of attention? And so you want to ask questions. You want to have that conversation. All right. Now, remember, 4 doesn't ask you to aspire. 4 asks you to build, right? This is action. This is an action number. So it is a number of the master craft person, the lineage keeper, the one who makes the invisible real. And when 4 appears in your practice, in your chart, in your reading, or on your path as a sign in synchronicity, something is ready to be made permanent. Okay, so I want to leave you with that idea. Wow. Can you believe it? That was it this month. Hang on. So much shorter. Usually I go through about 20 or 30 slides. And so this month I've been training Claude for months now. I wanted to see what he was capable of. I put in all my notes of what I wanted to review, and he kind of shortened it all down to very, very short points. And I thought he did a good job. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, I'm here if you have any questions, any follow-up, anything, I'm here. Other than that, you guys stay magical and happy May and happy number 4.